3 a.m. sharp. Dr. Aris Thorne's eyes were locked on the pulsing console in his private lab, the scarlet digits staring back at him like a stopwatch counting down to zero. $1.2 million in grant money vanished into the digital void. Just beneath the alert, a line of code glowed, something that could have spotted cellular aging before it even started, something that might have handed the world an extra decade of good health for millions. Instead, his fingers hovered, then pressed delete one last time. What kind of scientist tosses away the key to unlocking a healthier future for generations? The hallway outside his door was a ghost town, but the words still hung in the air like old perfume. Those silicon toys don't belong in a lab that's been doing real science for 30 years. The voice was his all right, but the way it echoed, loud and final, belonged to the grad student who just stormed out, notebook pressed to chest, still believing AI could crack the code of aging before the decade was up. In the hush of the lab, a single bead of serum kissed a petri dish, unfurling like a miniature sunrise. This was the last drop from a mouse whose telomeres had been tweaked in a trial that, not long ago, made headlines by promising to tack on 18 extra years, a number that had economists and policymakers sweating bullets. Out in the real world, the clock was ticking louder. Countries worldwide were groaning under the weight of graying populations' pension funds bleeding red ink, hospitals overflowing, families stretched thinner than ever as Grandma clocked in her 95th trip around the sun. The UN dropped the hammer recently. By 2050, 22% of every human on Earth will be pushing 65 or older, a shift economists have already tagged as the biggest headache this century. Conference halls buzzed with electricity. Researchers flashed slides showing AI models chewing through genetic data faster than a grad student could chug coffee, spotting aging pathways no one had ever noticed before. A fresh piece in Nature even argued that these digital sidekicks were flipping gerontology on its head, speeding up the hunt for drugs that could scrub out those zombie cells clogging our bodies. Source. Yet in a glass-walled room at the Institute for Gerontological Innovation, Dr. Thorne stood alone under the cold overhead lights, his slides a collage of old-school microscopy photos and scribbled margin notes. When a fresh-faced postdoc dared to ask about teaming up with some AI startup to crunch their data, Thorne's answer sliced through the room like a scalpel. We've spent our careers decoding aging the hard way. Why swap proven science for a flashy app? The room went quiet, no coughs, no whispers, just the hum of the projector. The stakes weren't some abstract thought experiment anymore. The NIH had just dropped billions on anti-aging research, betting that keeping people spry longer would save trillions in chronic care costs. Source. And Wall Street. They were lining up behind the next wave of AI-driven biotech, filing SEC filings faster than you could say FDA approval. Source. But with Dr. Thorne's wisdom sitting on the bench and the world's brightest coders revving up their GPUs, the gap yawned wider than ever. The dream of staying sharp well past 90 wasn't some sci-fi fantasy anymore. It was dangling right there in reach. The question hung in the sterile lab air like cigarette smoke. What if the one man who could have taught the machines how to truly beat aging just walked away? That same night, the code he erased lingered on a backup server untouched, while a new crew of researchers in another hemisphere geared up to run the exact same algorithm on a global scale. The world held its breath, fingers crossed, wondering if the next headline would shout, "Eternal youth is here," or "Another decade lost." I've been covering the mashup of biology and tech for what feels like forever, and one thing's clear. AI isn't just knocking on the lab door anymore. It's already remodeling the whole house. From predicting who'll hit 100 to repurposing drugs that have been collecting dust, the tools are rewriting the playbook. Source. The talking heads on CNN, Bloomberg, they're all screaming the same thing. Skip the silicon partners and we'll be leaving years, maybe decades, of healthier life on the table. Source. Dr. Aris Thorne's story isn't just a what not to do footnote, it's a mirror. It shows us two futures in one frame, one where tradition wins the day, and another where we finally let the machines help us outrun Father Time. Over the next few minutes, we'll trace how one man's choice sent shockwaves through the field, explore whether AI could have fast-tracked the anti-aging revolution, and ask the hard question: does longevity's future live in the lab or on the laptop? Stick around, we're about to peel back the layers on a single decision that might have pushed back the biggest medical breakthrough of our time. Disclaimer: these aren't medical instructions, just observations from someone who's watched this space for way too long. Dr. Aris Thorne's lab feels like a little temple devoted to painstaking methods. She leans on manual fluorescence microscopy, serially passages fibroblasts, and runs weekly Western blots for P16 Inc 4A to gauge cellular senescence. Every assay eats up a whole day prepping, then a night of incubation, and finally a morning spent crunching image data. Data trickles in at a snail's pace, reminiscent of sediment settling in a riverbed. Her crew, 4 postdocs and 2 techs, hunkers down for long shifts at benches that buzz with centrifuges. The grind never stops. Harvest, stain, count, then start over. Month after month, the tiny changes in telomere length linger right at the edge of statistical noise. Often the outcomes read as inconclusive or merely trend level, which forces another round of replication. Source. You can actually feel the fatigue in the air. Technicians pile their coffee cups into mini towers, while postdocs stare at the same control lanes over and over. If a senior scientist asks if the experiment is moving the needle, the reply is usually a quiet nod and a weary sigh. Their calendar quickly fills up with repeat assay slots, squeezing out any chance for exploratory projects. Meanwhile, over on the other side of campus, a fresh group, once brushed off as too ambitious, has gone a different way. Their leader, a former Thorne collaborator, claims the real bottleneck isn't biology at all but the data pipeline. Rather than hand-scoring each cell, they pipe raw microscopy images into a software platform that spots senescent phenotypes in a matter of seconds. Source. That software does more than just speed up counting. Scanning public proteomic databases, it uncovered a handful of previously missed extracellular matrix proteins that line up tightly with senescence markers. In a pilot run, the tool spotlighted a protein cluster that nudged the senescence index by 0.8 units, way bigger than the 0.1 unit drift you get from Thorne's manual assays. Beyond hunting biomarkers, the same platform predicts drug-cell interactions by cross-referencing chemical libraries with gene expression signatures. When they screened a library of FDA-approved drugs, the software flagged a lipid-altering compound that, in silico, cut P16 expression by about 30%. They validated that prediction in a single-cell line in just 48 hours, a timeline that would have taken Thorne's lab weeks of dose-response work. Source. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Thorne's work moves forward in measured steps, each one demanding fresh reagents and another round of manual analysis. The younger crew's workflow loops data back into the model after each run, letting the software fine-tune its hypotheses almost in real time. Funding streams mirror this methodological divide. An SEC filing for a biotech startup calls out a strategic investment in computationally driven anti-aging technology as a key differentiator, hinting that money is flowing toward computational routes. Source. NIH's latest budget also leans into computational approaches, earmarking grants for projects that leverage machine learning to accelerate geroscience. Source. Back in Thorne's lab, every incremental gain still counts, Each data point serves as a careful validation of a hypothesis. Still, the barrier she bumps into isn't a lack of insight but a ceiling set by manual throughput. Her team's weariness isn't just physical, it's the cumulative weight of looping the same slow cycle without a clear breakthrough signal. This parallel story shows what occurs when the same biological question meets a different toolbox. The software doesn't replace wet lab expertise. It reshapes the bottleneck, swapping hours of counting for seconds of classification. In the Nature piece, the authors claim that this computational leverage can compress the discovery timeline for age-related interventions. Source: both groups share the same goal, extending healthy lifespan, but their routes split when it comes to handling data. Thorne's meticulous, low-throughput pipeline delivers high-confidence results, albeit at a glacial pace. The younger crew's computationally augmented pipeline trades a bit of manual control for speed, surfacing novel markers and drug leads in days instead of months. Tension builds as observers watch these two scientific cultures clash. One side clings to tradition, believing each incremental finding lays a solid foundation. The other adopts a paradigm where algorithms sift through millions of variables, surfacing patterns that human eyes would miss. This pause in the story highlights a key question. As the aging clock ticks inexorably forward, is a slower, steadier approach enough, or must the field speed up or risk being left behind? Dr. Aris Thorne stepped into the towering foyer of the International Gerontology Summit, his shoulders still shouldering a 10-year legacy built on hand-crafted assays and labor-intensive animal work. A low hum of excitement rippled through the auditorium. A fresh crew from the computer-powered BioAge lab was about to roll out their newest breakthrough. Up on the stage, a polished holographic panel sprang to life, spilling a waterfall of molecular networks that the system had charted in less than a month. "We've pinpointed a novel therapeutic route that tweaks senescent cell signaling with unmatched precision," the lead data scientist declared. The audience roared, and the slide beside it referenced a peer-reviewed Nature article showing how computer-assisted approaches can speed aging research by orders of magnitude. Source: Thorne stared at the unfolding graphs, each node a protein-protein handshake, each line a predicted tweak. The system stitched together scattered pathways that researchers had chased for years, surfacing a single drug target that might stretch mouse health span in just weeks. A recent SEC filing from a major biotech venture capital fund flagged its fresh investment in exactly this sort of computer-powered anti-aging tech, underscoring the commercial faith now riding the data. Source: the proof wasn't just compelling, it was downright indisputable. A NIH report released earlier that year noted a surge in federal dollars for projects that blend machine learning tricks into gerontology, pointing out that such partnerships routinely shrink discovery timelines from years to months. Source: Thorne's thoughts sprinted. He remembered endless nights tweaking assays, the grant pitches that shouted human expertise over shortcut-taking computers. Now, a single model had birthed a hypothesis that, according to a Science Direct book chapter, would have demanded decades of experimental validation under traditional methods. Source: the hall fell hushed as the team laid out their validation pipeline, high-throughput screens, virtual toxicity checks, and swift animal trials, all wrapped up in a sliver of the time Thorne's lab usually needed. A CNN investigative story from February 2022 quoted top experts lauding the speed and accuracy of these computer-driven findings, warning that the gap between human intuition and algorithmic insight is widening. Source: in that instant, Thorne felt a deep shift. The years he'd spent inching forward now looked like a slow crawl beside the sprint the system had just pulled off. The insight was quiet yet earth-shattering. His doubt had not only stalled his own work, but also delayed the perk's millions' hope for a longer, healthier life. He tasted regret, not as a personal flaw, but as a collective missed chance. The price of his hesitation isn't counted in dollars or papers, but in extra months, maybe years of human suffering that might have been eased if his lab had adopted the tools on display. As the crowd drifted out, Thorne lingered, eyes glued to the glowing data. The conference handed him a mirror, reflecting a future where teamwork between human insight and smart systems isn't optional, it's essential. He knew, with a clarity that cut through the applause, that the next chapter of his career must start with a new attitude: humility, openness, and a readiness to let the machine teach what he once tried to hide. Science is at a major fork in the road right now, where real human brains meet the razor-sharp logic of machines. That big Nature paper last year proved that AI can scan through millions of molecular handshakes and spot pathways lab geeks have been totally blind to source. You need teams that actually talk to each other: biologists chewing on data, data nerds learning biology 101, ethicists yelling, "Hold on," to turn those hidden patterns into pills people can actually swallow. And the market's already yapping about it. That biotech giant's SEC filing basically screamed, "We're betting the farm on AI-driven anti-aging tech," which tells you the money folks won't fund lone wolf science anymore. Source. But none of this works if we screw up the ethics. The NIH guys put it bluntly in their latest memo. Any anti-aging magic has to come with consent forms, fair access for every zip code, and zero surprise side effects 30 years from now. Source. And we're not talking hypotheticals here. CNN's deep dive showed how patient data can leak faster than a gossip chain, while the same breakthroughs might only reach folks with platinum credit scores. Source. Bottom line, chasing longer life is no longer a test tube-only gig. It's now a three-way tango with biology, code, and common sense. Get it right, and we're not just talking extra birthdays, we're talking extra birthdays without the walker. Screw it up, and we'll have a future where only the rich get to read the fine print. Time to act. Scientists need to stop hoarding their petri dishes and start swapping them with coders. Policymakers gotta stop writing rules after the labs catch fire. And Joe needs to stop treating every headline like a TED Talk and start asking tough questions. Grab the tools, fund the weirdos who can code and care in the same breath, and bake humane choices into the DNA of every grant and every line of code. The real boss-level challenge isn't teaching machines to think. It's teaching humans